Hey everybody, it's AJ Mansour. Popping in real quick before we start today's podcast to say thank you to a company within our community that is doing really good things. Cultivated CBD. You've heard us talk about them on the radio, and now they're sponsoring the Here and Now podcast. I'd like to thank them for that. This is a company that is engaged in our community and believes in making our community a better place for everybody. So, encourage you now, check out cultivatedcbd.com. We have a special promo code KFAN. You can insert that promo code at the checkout and get 10% off all the CBD products, 10% off with that promo code KFAN at checkout. We got fruit de pate gummies, the tincture oils, the spearmint flavor is my favorite, and then the new CBD salve, the heating and cooling balm that you can put on your sore muscles after you work out in the summer, after you're working in the yard, whatever it might be. Big time thanks to Cultivated CBD. You'll see that promo code down in this little ticker. It'll run throughout the podcast on this video, and head over cultivatedcbd.com. Anthony and the gang, thank you so much for your belief in this podcast and the important messages in our community to just make it a better place. So thank you, Cultivated CBD. Welcome back to the Here and Now podcast. My name is AJ Mansour. Josh Cohn, my co-host, is in the middle here, this way. And then our guest today, a special guest from the Minnesota Freedom Fighters. His name is Jamil Jackson. We got tied together with him through a mutual friend who is active in the city. And the Minnesota Freedom Fighters have a really cool story, a cool purpose, and a cool origin that got started, I guess, around some not so cool stuff. But they're doing some really good things in our community. So, Jamil, thank you for taking some time out of your night tonight to join us. We appreciate that. And we're looking forward to a little bit of a conversation, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. I'm very intrigued by the podcast.
Yeah, no doubt, man. It's been fun. I think I tell our guests this every week. It's been a learning experience, and that's kind of been the point of this, is to have these conversations for myself selfishly, but for other people too that listen to KFAN, that are part of our core audience, but maybe aren't aware. They may have a passion for racial justice. They may have their heartstrings had been pulled with George Floyd and everything that's been going on in our city here in Minneapolis, but don't know what to do. They don't feel prepared. They don't feel knowledgeable enough. That's what these conversations are for. So tell us a little bit about the Minnesota Freedom Fighters. Let's start maybe at the beginning, the origin of your group and what you guys have been doing the last couple months.
Yeah, so how we got started was on the unfortunate death of George Floyd, obviously, and then the south side of Minneapolis started to burn. And the president of the NAACP, Minneapolis chapter of the NAACP, Leslie Redmond, put out a call to the community and just asked for men to show up to protect the West Broadway corridor, right? To keep our side of the city from looking like their side of the city. The first night, maybe about 15, 20 men showed up. Kind of a light night, but I guess in contrast to what we were doing, it was pretty heated, but not too much action going on. The next day, we encountered some people trying to come into our neighborhood and do some damage. So a call was put out by the people that showed up, and we ended up with about 60 maybe people showing up armed, ready to protect the community. So it was very interesting and tense and beautiful to see all in the same breath, right? Seeing the men of the community stepping up to protect the community, and it happens in silos, but to see everybody at once was a beautiful thing. And so from there, for the next 10 nights, we ended up dwindling down to about 25 of us. For the next 10 nights, we just protected West Broadway overnight, making sure that everything was safe. Once the unrest started to settle down a little bit, we started to feel like the threat was gone. Most of us went home thinking that this was over. The next few nights, though, guys still showed up to protect, even though we were saying we were done. And I guess as a co-founder, what I started to realize is that some of these men started to find purpose in themselves with the work that we did by protecting our community, right? They started to realize their role and their responsibility to their community, to their self, and to their family. Within those 12 days, the conversations that we had as men within that responsibility, under that responsibility, pushed them to keep coming. And so what we decided is that, our community needed us. At this point, we had a good a good showing in the community, if you will, right? The community response was pretty good. And so we actually started getting phone calls from the community. People were starting to inbox us on Facebook and our individual pages asking for us to come into their communities to help patrol and protect. And so we called all the guys that were truly interested in doing this, not for money, not for fame, but for actually the work. And that leads us to today.
I love just what you guys are doing. I love the idea of taking action, right? But in protecting your community. So
right.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, did you, I don't know if you maybe went out to protest first, or you were trying to, like, what was the thought behind, and how do you feel about this idea of being out and going out and doing something, but it's a positive, right? It's having a positive impact on the community. How important is that?
Right, right. Well, it's very important for me. So outside of the work that I do with the Minnesota Freedom Fighters, I'm also a consultant for the city of Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention, working on youth violence prevention. I also run my own organization called CEO, which stands for Change Equals Opportunity, and we focus on the mentorship of males of color, ages 12 to 25, in the areas of education, employment, and life skills. So I'm ingrained in it already, right? So when the call was put out, I came to protect the community that I already serve. And again, I mean, nobody knew what to expect. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. We just knew that we didn't want our city to burn. And we didn't know who the threats were, where they were going to be coming from. So organically, we formed a unit, roles and positions were put into play, and everybody followed suit. In the interim, it was about white supremacist groups, right? It was about people coming through trying to burn the buildings down. What it morphed into was, okay, we just can't protect from outside intruders. We have to protect within as well, right? So, and just as much as it's about protecting, it's about showing a force of men in the community and women. I mean, I won't disclaim them, but from speaking from the Minnesota Freedom Fighters perspective, right? Black men in the community and a positive image with guns, right? Making sure that everybody's safe. Everybody.
You mentioned the with guns portion. You know, we're not used to that, I guess, up here in Minnesota. You know, you go down south and you get into Texas, and you'll see people carrying guns left and right. Conceal and carry is pretty new up here, but for sure, just the visual of an assault style rifle gets some people up this neck of the woods a little uneasy. What has that been like when you are trying to establish an image, a persona, a role in this community, but at the same time you're stepping into a community that's not used to seeing people, civilians carrying guns?
Right. Well, I mean, I guess you can say that's part of the reason why we morphed it back together, was because we realized the importance of that image and the fact that we were able to use that moment, right, that open moment to be out kind of sort of the police being occupied with other things, if you will, right, to give our community a pure perspective of what it could look like for community protection and patrol, and what it does look like for Black men to have guns in protecting and patrolling role, and not right in the role of a criminal, right, or somebody going to do something with a gun. Sure. Our goal is to never shoot a bullet, but our goal, just as equal to that, is to make sure everybody is safe.
Yeah, no, I mean this with all due respect, so please don't misunderstand this question, but I want to know, how are you different than the police? Like, what are you guys doing differently? You're from the community. You talked about the relationship with the community, the idea of the role models of strong Black men protecting their community. Can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah. So one, we're not going to look for crime. We're not going to look for crime. That's number one, right? Our three focal points are engagement, relationships, and resources. So, being that I already run a life skills mentoring program for youth, and to be honest, my lack is men. Selfishly, I'm able to use these men to be mentors to the kids of the community, right? And so, to some degree, our weaponry is our carry, right? So what we get is intrigue. We get kids that are interested in who we are, and they approach us, and then it allows a conversation. And through that conversation, we get to build. And amongst that building, we get to offer the resources that we as men in the community can provide, whether that's job opportunities or, housing opportunities, whatever it is. I mean, our role within the community as Minnesota Freedom Fighters is not just to protect with guns, but it's also to bring our community together, right? So we're volunteering in the community. We're having events in the community where no guns are present. So they get to know both and.
Yeah. This organization came together pretty organically, like you mentioned, as in a call to response to the situation that was unfolding in Minneapolis. But it is kind of the first sense of reality that we've seen for what it might look like for that shift of protection from relying completely on the police and putting probably too much pressure on them to handle certain situations where they shouldn't be having to deal with that. And maybe it's better for somebody in the community to do this, or maybe it's better for somebody like yourself that is ingrained in mentorship, talking with youth so things don't escalate so quickly. Along with that, though, I would have to imagine, and please tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong, that there was a little maybe misunderstanding or resistance between your group and maybe the initial interactions you had with the Minneapolis police. What was that like initially, and what is that relationship between your group and the police like now?
I won't say it's vastly different. It's very similar. The reality is in that time, there was a huge need for us to be present. In their opinion, some of them, I'm sure, believe that our presence is no longer needed. And I'm sure some of it has to do with the insecurity of where they sit in terms of their jobs being in jeopardy, right? So we're very respectful and understanding of that. I mean, we're not here to replace no one's job or, I don't see them as police officers. I see them as humans, right? So they got families to feed. They took an oath to protect. They're doing the best that they can. And I'm not saying that they're all bad or that they're all good, right? I mean, it is what it is. We as a community have a role to play with or without their lack of, if that makes sense, right? Sure. And we got to step up. The reality is the level of violence and crime that is going on in our community is not because of the lack of the police, it's because of the lack of the community. And we have to own that, right? That's just period. I don't know what else to say besides that on that part of it. But back to your question, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. We know that there are officers out there, again, that don't believe that what we're doing is right because they're not used to it. They haven't seen it. They haven't encountered it. Usually when they see a black man with a gun, the man is running from them, right? Or again, committing a crime of some sort. And so seeing us and our presence and standing strong and standing firm in our purpose and our beliefs, I'm sure the unknown is scary to everybody. We've had good conversations in terms of with leadership and police of what our role looks like versus what they maybe want us to be. And we're still working on that. It's a ever evolving thing, right? As they continue to change with the times with city council and the mayor's office and what's really going to happen with the police that really is going to determine what we ultimately look like. So we're not trying to go too deep right with it. So right now we're not really patrolling our community with long guns. We're patrolling our community with side pieces, conceal and carries, right? Because we don't want to entice our community, nor do we want to entice the police. But we're staying ready and on guard for the day that we have to mount up that way every day, right? To play a bigger role. We mainly are doing marches and events for protection and patrol. We are business, so it's LLC, as we do want to get into some other types of things other than just patrolling our community. But the relationship is good, I would say, for the most part.
You said a sentence that I loved that was, we want to see them as people, not just as police officers, right?
Right.
I strongly believe that we need more of that in general, and not whether it's looking at police officers or how police officers look at Black people or whatever that is. Can you speak to that empathy that everyone?
Yeah, well, it for me. Being a consultant for the Office of Violence Prevention, I meet with police on a regular basis. We have conversations about how to engage youth, right? Things that are working, things that aren't working, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For us as a whole, as a Minnesota Freedom Fighters, what was interesting to me is that, we were on patrol for about 12 nights, from sundown to sun up, right? Walkie talkies, we're at vantage points, so we got guys everywhere, and that walkie talkie is chirping every 2 seconds. There are cars moving by, right? There's suspicious activity. We're tired, right? Because we still got to go home and deal with our families and get up and do work and all that, and then come back here stressed. And you add, and this is a point that we had in one of our conversations as a group, right? You add financial situations, you add marriage situations, you add all these things that they have to bring to the table, and then still be alert and ready, for every call, and it's draining. And so by day 5, day 6, I mean, we were really having, serious conversations of what they have to go through on a daily basis, right? And so it does allow for that empathy and that sympathy for the situation, both. I applaud anybody who feels like it's within him to put his life on the line to serve and protect. Now, I think that there are ways that they can be done differently, right? I think that there are definitely some characteristics, traits that police in general carry that have a stigma to our community, and therefore that we could do a better job of engaging. But I also understand that there's a thin line, because their job is to do what their job is to do, right? Again, we just have to be better as community to build within community, to be able to hold some of us responsible ourselves before it gets to that level. Right.
Sure. Absolutely. Speaking from inside that community, what are some things that the community can do? It's a very broad question, and I'm sure it's a very deep answer. But when you talk about it
again, one, that we're in COVID, so that presents a whole nother problem within itself. But if you remove that, I mean, we have to provide jobs. We have to understand the economy. We have to understand that when we were kids, Target and the video store and all those things were jobs that were reserved for us, right? To kind of get into play and have a little pocket change and be able to buy the things that we want. Those things don't exist no more. And so we're also teaching from an old script, if you will, because now we're all technology, but we're not focusing on that. And so kids aren't getting trained on jobs in the sense that when they become teenagers, they can start entering those fields, right, that carry longevity onto college and what they're going to do. It doesn't exist. So we as a community, those are the things that we can provide, right? Relationships, making sure that every kid has somebody to call, has something they can go to, right? So through my organization, we do care packages, we do college visits, we do internships, right? Those are the things that as the community we're responsible for, not school, not police, not the city. Right. These are it's our responsibility to expose them to the things that we want them to be.
Yeah. That's my question was going to be pretty similar about what do you do in the community? You mentioned the different organizations. You talk about education. You talk about mentorship. You talk about job training. You talk about relationship with the local police. What are some things that you do, your organizations, and then where did your passion for this start? What was the thing that was like? Is there one thing, or did you grow up wanting this? Is this something you saw?
So I grew up in North Minneapolis. I'm the oldest of 6. My parents separated when I was 15. My dad left and was out of the picture completely. My mom became an addict. And so I basically had to drop out of school to raise my brothers and sisters. In that, our house became that house where all the neighborhood kids who had similar family, dynamics came to hang out. So naturally, I became the big brother to everybody. So from there, it was, okay, how I'm going to keep them occupied, right? So it was coming up with different activities, doing different stuff, creating a basketball team, an AAU basketball team for them, just all those type of stuff, which led me to stay connected to the park that I grew up with. There was a guy named Gary Wilson, who was an old man who had introduced me to that park, and he always stayed on me about, he saw something in me that was deeper than who I was at the moment, and he wouldn't let that moment allow him not to love me. Right. And by this time I was in the streets hustling. Right. And so that led to me becoming a coach at the park. And from there, it allowed me, through my kids playing, see other kids who didn't have what my kids have, and made me realize that my role was bigger than just my children. Right. That if I really wanted my children to be successful, that I had to reach and teach their friends and their circle to ensure that they all had the same level, right, that I was providing for my kids. Otherwise, that was a potential for my kid to be pulled down, right? And so, I mean, from there, everything else just grew. So CEO, Change Equals Opportunity, is the name of my organization. It started with me doing an after-school program at my kid's school. And from there, I started a basketball league called Run and Shoot. And so that was for neighborhood kids who couldn't pay to play AAU travel basketball, right? This is when 2010 is when I started this, and this is when basketball was just starting to boom in Minnesota. Prices were getting skyrocketed, and neighborhood kids didn't have the means to go out of the city to play. So I started an inner city league, in-house league, that just morphed to some great stuff, right? So we've had a lot of kids that, you know, have come through the city, have played in our Chet Holmgren, right? Rashad Vaughn, Gino Crandall, my son Jamil Jackson. The beat goes on and on and on, right? We now have college coaches that come in and they're recruiting the kids straight out of the gym. Last year, we sent 6 kids to college that didn't play high school basketball, right? And so in order to play in my league, the kids have to do life skills mentoring program. So they have to show up an hour early and go through CEO sessions. CEO sessions, we focus on exposure to college, career, and cultural experiences and opportunities. So I bring in guest speakers to talk to them from anything from financial literacy to ACT prep. We talk about traditional college versus HBCU. You know, we talk about how college is paid for through your high school academics, right? And just everything that I wish I would have had as a kid, right? I try to through on the damn. I own a few businesses. I only hire youth and felons. And so I teach a lot about entrepreneurship. I never went to college, right? My kids go to college. And so I always bring them in and we have a great debate about the differences, right? Where their life sits at their age versus where my life sat at their age, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's really about intellectual stimulation, right? My son was 6'6", 40-inch vertical, and he's not going to the NBA, right? So I had to prepare him for what life was going to be like in real life. And knowing that the majority of my kids, not all of them, don't have the physical attributes that he had. If he ain't going, they ain't going, right? So let's stop selling them this falsehood of dreaming, because that's what happens. Kids get to high school, they start to fizzle out because they realize they're not the it factor no more. And we haven't put anything into their mind. And so now they're dead in the water. So now they've lost hope. We've given up on them because we can't quote unquote use them anymore, right? And so what do we do?
I love that. Everything about that. That was great.
Yeah, man. We could have asked you about a dozen different questions about, you know, what the community needs. And the reality is all we needed to do was hear your story. I mean, you got your hand in schools, you got your hand in the community, you got your hand in the park. It comes from an experience that you had with an elderly gentleman who invested into you, and now you're paying that forward into your sons, into your family, into your friends in your neighborhood. That's what that is. That's what that community that you talked about is. That's great, man. You know, we've taken a good chunk of your time on a beautiful weeknight. We want to let you get going. But, you know, one thing I do want to know is as you sit here and you plan, I mean, you seem to me like a guy who has visions and has a vision for a company and has a vision for an organization and has a vision for mentorship. What's the vision for the Minnesota Freedom Fighters? What's next? What are the next steps? What can people in our communities who might want to get invested do to support you guys? What's on the horizon for you and your group of guys?
Man, that is a loaded question. To be honest, it's all of it, right? It's again, like I tell these guys, what kept bringing me back again was that the fact that I do all these things and I'm solo, right? So I need support. I mentor about 300 kids a year, and if I can get these guys to understand their purpose in life, right, and accept who they are, I mean, because the biggest attribute of a man is accepting who you are, right? We don't have to fake the funk. It is what it is. Like, we made mistakes. Here we are. Here we stand. Let's grow from it. And then we can show our kids that. A lot of this violence stems from that. It stems from cries from help, right? And they have nobody to cry to. You can't go to school and yell. You can't yell in your house because it don't belong to you. Can't yell at your girlfriend, right? Can't yell at your kids. So what do? We haven't taught them an outlet. We don't give them spaces to speak. And then us as adults, we don't share. We don't share our vulnerabilities. And so they see us as perfect. So there's a natural rebellion that happens because when we speak to them, we're speaking them from a place of perfection in their eyes, right?
Yeah, man, and ain't that the truth? You know, I remember growing up and thinking my dad was perfect, my parents were perfect, my friends' parents were perfect, and then you start to learn the reality. You start to understand that everybody struggled with bills and everybody struggled to get along with each other and stuff. So that's real, man. I appreciate it. Jamil, we'll let you go, man. I really do appreciate your time. I appreciate what you're doing with your community. You've inspired a bunch of people, 2 of them right here on this podcast, I know for sure, to invest in their communities, whether it be Minneapolis, St. Paul, Osseo, Burnsville, whatever it might be. This can be replicated anywhere. This isn't stuck in Minneapolis. I mean, our community as a whole, our world as a whole, where there's a lot of issues in our world and our country right now, can be better if we all focus on that community and do so in the ways that you've exemplified. So I appreciate what you do. I appreciate what you've done and you are continuing to do. And I really appreciate the time you gave us tonight, my man.
No problem, man. I appreciate you guys. Have a good night.
Hey, absolutely, man. We'll talk to you later.
All right.